Guys, thank you for that. We are starting a 3-week series today called Business Time. And there's a lot of songs that have to do with business, but the first one I could think of, and that's actually the title of the sermon today, was, I don't even know the name of it, but it just goes, let's get down to business. Does anybody know that song? No? Okay, good. Well, then I promise it's a real song that I've heard, not just in my brain. But yeah, it's a new series called Business Time. It's time for business, and that's why it's called Business Time. Now, here's what I think about when I think about business. I think about people in their suits and stuff and their briefcases scurrying along the sidewalks of New York City and taking everything so serious. And I've got to get these reports into Mr. Johnson, and this thing has to happen. And they take it so seriously, and it consumes so much of people's lives, their business does, but ultimately, in the scope of life, it's really meaningless. All business is really meaningless, especially in the scope of eternity. I mean, business takes such a priority in so many Christian lives, but it's just made up, man-made stuff. That's all it really is. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with business or making money or anything like that, but ultimately, all of the business that we do here on earth, making money, stock markets, all of that stuff, it does nothing for us for eternity. It does nothing for us after this planet. It's almost comical to me that it's so fleeting, but people take it so seriously. Now, you may think, Wayne, you're not giving enough consideration to business. You may be thinking that I think this Jesus stuff is too important or too consuming or whatever. Well, I'm a pastor and I'm a follower of Jesus, so you should just expect that from me. Right? If I was up here telling you that business was more important than Jesus, y'all would drive me out with the pitchforks and stuff. I'm not knocking business or companies or even working hard. I'm just sharing that I think there's more important business for Christians to focus on. Something eternal, something lasting, something that is life-changing for me and for you and for everybody. Now, in Luke chapter 2, there is a story about a preteen Jesus, and I think it's a very interesting story, especially because we don't have a lot of information about the between years of Jesus. You know, we have his birth, and then they ran away from Herod, who wanted to kill him. And then we have this one little story, and then Jesus' ministry, where he's gathering disciples, going to the cross, healing people, and all that stuff. So we don't have a lot of the in-between stuff, but there's a very interesting in-between story about Jesus. And this story will give us our focus for the entire 3-week series here. And I'm just going to read it to you. It's in Luke chapter 2, starting in 41. You can look that up later, write it down, whatever you want to do. But I'm just going to read it to you and talk about it. We don't have to search it or anything right now. All right. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, Jesus, is any 12-year-olds in here? Elika, how old are you? 12? Come on up. Come on up. Hey, thanks for coming up. I thought for sure I'd have to wrangle you. Hey, this is Elika. Let's give a round of applause for Elika. Okay, just for reference, this is what a 12-year-old looks like. All right, go sit down. You're good. When Jesus was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Mom and Dad packed up, got in a truck, started out of Jerusalem. Jesus was over doing whatever he was doing. They had no idea. They thought he was in the back of the truck. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. All right, everybody give me one finger. One day. They traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. Give me another finger. That's 2 days of travel. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts. Give me 5. All right? 5 days of not having Jesus with them. Okay, you can put your hands down. After 3 days, they found him in the temple court, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. I don't know what the real translation of the word astonished is, but I can think of other emotions that might come across my brain than astonished after 5 days. Okay, that's me. His mother said to him, I wish that we could read her tone here. His mother said to him, Son, why have you treated us like this? I mean, it would be very interesting to know her tone of voice. I don't think mine would have been like, you scamp, you know. Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. And Jesus responded to her very respectfully. Why were you searching for me? He asked. Did you not know I had to be in my Father's house? Okay, first things first. Moms in the room. You ever felt like a bad mom? Anybody? Dads, you ever felt like a bad dad? Anybody ever left their kid in a foreign city for 5 days? Was that kid the savior of the world? All right, so if you've not done that, then maybe cut yourself some slack when your kid's throwing a tantrum at Kroger's, all right? All right, and the kid won't shut up because they want Cheerios. Just relax. Cut yourself some slack. But I do love the story, and I think it really does make me wonder about Joseph and Mary's reaction when they finally saw Jesus in the temple surrounded by all these grown men, and he is educating them about what's going on. It makes me think about times when, parents, if you've ever watched your kids doing something and they don't know you're watching them, you kind of get to see like who they really are when you're not around. It's kind of a neat thing to peek through the window and just kind of look and see, not like a creeper, but just, just to see how they are. So I always wonder, like about her tone, Did they see him and then did they hide just so they could watch for a second? Or did they see him and run down the stairs and grab him by the back of the neck and take him out of there? Like, you know what I mean? I just find all of that stuff really interesting. I don't know, but either way, they had been anxiously searching for him, and they asked him, why have you treated us this way? I really like how the New King James Version translates Jesus' response. It says it like this. Jesus said to them, why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's what? My Father's business. Which begs the question to me, what is the Father's business? Now, in order for us to find out what the Father's business is, we have to go back in time, all the way back to the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament of the Bible. What we're going to be talking about is something that is called the Shema. Can you say Shema? Yeah, it's not Shema, Shema, in Deuteronomy chapter 6. The Shema is a collection of sermons by Moses that it just refers really to a couple of lines, verses 4 and 5 in Deuteronomy 6. But it became like a daily prayer. It was like a call to worship for the Jewish people. And they would do it morning and night, and they would do it during their worship services. They would repeat these things. And so what Moses is going to do in the Shema is challenge them with wisdom and warning to not repeat the same mistakes that they had made and that got them into slavery in Egypt in the first place. And so he's going to invite them to respond to God's grace and mercy with love, faithfulness, and obedience. Now, the Israelites, the Jewish people, were enslaved in Egypt. They cried out to God. God sent Moses after a whole bunch of arguing and whatever. The Israelites left Egypt, and they finally escaped. They went through the Red Sea on dry land, all that stuff. And about 6 months after they left Egypt, after they left their slavery, this is when God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. So God's up on the mountain, Moses goes up on the mountain, and however they did that, God gave Moses these 10 Commandments. And Moses has come down to share these 10 Commandments with the Jewish people. This is what God wants you to do. A lot of people think it stops at the 10 Commandments, but there's a whole lot of Bible after the 10 Commandments are written. And Moses, in the same context, probably within the same hour of his delivering of the 10 Commandments, he gives the Shema. He starts to give this sermon. And he's essentially going to tell them, y'all, he's from the South, y'all need to obey God's commands. In the past, you didn't. And look where it got you. Enslaved in Egypt. Being disobedient to God's commands didn't work out so well for you, now did it? Now that's just a paraphrase from the Wayne Wagner International Version. But I wonder if anyone in here has disobeyed God's commands before. I wonder if we disobeyed and it didn't work out so well. Makes me ask, well, why does God give us commands in the first place? Like, shouldn't we just do whatever we want to do? Here's why God gives us his commands and what his commands do for us. The commands that God gives us are for our protection and our provision. Protection and provision. It's a very simple concept about his commands. They protect us and they provide life for us. His commands protect us from the harmful, very harmful, mental, emotional, and physical effects of sin, and they provide a safer passage through this world. Now notice I said safer, not safe. All right? It's a safer passage through this world. I'll give you one example of a command that does all of these things, and it's when he said, do not commit adultery. Do not commit adultery. All right, now, if you've done this, or if you know someone who has done this, you know that it is extremely harmful. It's hurtful mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. But all of that could have been avoided had the adultery not occurred. Okay, so God gave us the command to protect us from all of that pain and to provide for us a safer passage through this world. Everybody tracking? We're good on that? All right. Now, Moses calls the Israelites together, and he's going to teach them this Shema thing, and it's going to be on the screen. You can follow along with it. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 4, he says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." In this passage, I believe that Moses is telling us the Father's business comes from verse 5, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. He also says, from your heart, teach it to your kids. Talk about it during your day, wherever you go. Make reminders for yourself that your job, that the Father's business, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Now, here's why Moses says that, continuing in Deuteronomy 6. He encourages us to obey these commands so that, all right, listen, if ever you're reading the Bible and you see the words so that, circle it, stop, read it like 10 times so you can put this thing and this thing together. So that is a this, then sort of deal. All right? Do this so that this will happen. And Moses continues to give them that advice through Deuteronomy 6. Do this so that you may have a long life, so that it may go well with you. Do this so that when someone asks you, why are you getting up on Sunday to go over to that building? God is everywhere. Why are you serving people? Why do you give your money? Why are you doing this thing? Why are you going to a life group? Why are you going to an equip class? Why are you doing the things that you're doing with your church? You do this so that when somebody asks you that, you can say, I used to be a slave, but Jesus set me free. That's why we do these things. So that when someone asks, we can say, I used to be a slave, but Jesus has set me free. In Matthew chapter 22, Jesus is going to quote the Shema. Matthew chapter 22, verse 36, someone comes to Jesus with the question, and they say, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." And then he says, "This is the first and greatest commandment." Now we can recognize, because we just talked about it, that Jesus is quoting Moses here. Jesus is quoting the Shema. But Jesus does not stop there. And here's the interesting thing about everything that Jesus taught us in the New Testament. That dude always takes it one step further. Now, for example, we talked about the adultery thing, the 10 Commandments. Moses said, "Do not commit adultery." But Jesus said, "I tell you," he said, "Moses told you don't commit adultery, but I tell you, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery." So Jesus he's taking things a step further. So he has established in this passage that the number one priority of the life of a follower of Jesus is to love God. It's our number one priority. It's the first and greatest commandment. But then he takes it a step further. He says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it in verse 39. "Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So, if we take the Bible in context, if we take the Bible as a whole, it means that the Father's business is for us to love God and love people. This is the Father's business that Jesus wants us to be about. So if Jesus tells us that this is his Father's business and we want to imitate Jesus and be like Jesus, it means that our business is to love God and love people. This is the context of the Bible. You can narrow the entire Bible down to these 4 words. This is what Jesus wants from us. And if we want to be like Jesus and imitate Jesus, this is where our heads need to be and where our actions need to be. Because that is the business of a follower of Jesus. As a church, this is our core. I stole this from the front lobby, you know. You probably didn't notice that. But this is our core as a church, to love God and to love people. Everything about you or life on this earth comes from a core. An apple is not built starting with the skin. It doesn't inflate like a balloon with apple pieces. It starts from the core. This is where we start as a church. That's why this is our core. And if you are a person who has said yes to Jesus and are trying to live your life for Jesus, then this is your core as an individual. As a church, this is our core. If you're saying yes to Jesus, then this is your core. Your to-do list can be thrown in the trash because you can memorize this. That's our core. It's what Jesus wants from us. And he even says that everything hangs on these 2 commands. Love God and love people is the Father's business. So really quickly, I want to give you 4 ways that fleshes out for us. Okay? First one is this, and it's obvious. Obey God's commands. Obey God's commands. Moses told us the benefits of doing this in the Shema. He said you obey God's commands so that it may go well with you. And I want to be very clear that when Moses said so that it may go well with you, the word well means well. It doesn't translate to perfect. Nobody who has started following Jesus has had a perfect life. Come on, an amen for real. Okay. So that it may go well with you. If you are looking to God for wisdom and following what he's telling you, it will be good for your life. It will. It just will. God's commands are to protect and provide, not restrict and control. Come on, did y'all hear that? God's commands are to protect and to provide, not to restrict and control, so that it may go well with you. Fleshes out by obeying God's commands. And look at 1 John 5:3. This is love for God. If you want to know what it means to love God, here's the answer. To keep his commands. And his commands are not burdensome. How could something that is meant to protect you and provide for you be a burden? You know what a burden is, though? It's dealing with the repercussions and fallout of not obeying God's commands. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you're dealing with those repercussions right now. Obeying God's commands is one way to love God. Another way is through Bible reading and prayer conversations. And I like to refer to this as prayer conversations because it's just a constant communication with God. It doesn't have to be some special, I'm going to go sit in the closet and light a candle and make sure the kids are 1,000 miles away at grandma's house, and it's just a daily thing. But loving God is communicating with him. It's reading the note that he left for us. That's the Bible. It's reading the note that he left for us. It's learning about him, loving him, and sharing him with others. It's getting to know him on a deeper level. Talking with him conversationally throughout your day and in various situations. Bible reading and prayer conversations are a way to be connected to God, to develop a relationship with him. And without connection to God, we will never, ever be able to truly love God. Another way that this fleshes out is church attendance. You go, come on, we're already here. Stop yelling at us for not being here one time 6 months. No, I'm not doing that at all. I'm just saying that another way that love God, love people fleshes out is through church attendance. Not only is church attendance good for you, but it is also good for other people to see you, to encourage you, and to be encouraged by you. It's also good for me, your preacher. It's good for me to see you, to try and maybe encourage you with something or hear about your week or whatever's going on, and to be encouraged by you. I don't know if you know this or not, but their buckets of encouragement have holes in the bottom. Anybody know that? It's nice to be encouraged. Proverbs talks about kind words lifting up your spirit. And it's good. We all need this. And that's why church attendance is a way for us to love people, because we can come into this place and be an encouragement to one another. Plus, each Sunday, it's like we're gathering as a family and getting pumped up to go out into the world next week. Coming to church weekly is a simple way to put God first and to love people by encouraging them. Last thing is this. If we want to be about the Father's business, we can see a need and fill a need. Seeing needs and filling needs. This is how it fleshes out for us, by seeing needs and filling needs. And I'll say it like this. Most of the time, loving God fleshes out by serving other people. Most of the time, loving God fleshes out by how we serve and love and are kind to other people. So if you see a need and you can fill that need, you should fill that need. The book of James talks about this. And he says something along the lines of, if you see somebody in need and you don't do anything about their needs, then what good is your faith? What good is your faith if you see someone in need, can do something, and don't do it? He says that faith is dead. But for us, the people of Northampton, we're not talking about living with dead faith. We're talking about loving God and loving people biblically. If there's a need and you can fill it, and you'll be doing the Father's business. All right. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. All right? I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. See, even my daughter is just abandoning. No. That was perfect timing. Tired of this guy talking all the time. But these are not complex ideas. It's not complex ideas. It's all stuff that we can all do. It simply requires us to put aside ourselves, to release control, and do what God is asking us to do. And concentrating on something greater. Concentrating on a better business model for our life. Now, there's a lot more that I could say about this. We could be here till 3, 4 o'clock, but I'm going to leave it there. Obey commands, read the Bible, pray, come to church, fill whatever needs you can fill. This is how loving God and loving people can start to flesh out. It's not a complete list. It's not the end of the marathon, but I will tell you this. It's past the starting line. Loving God and loving people is the Father's business. And if loving God and loving people is the Father's business, then guess what? It's business time. Let's clock in and let's get to work. Okay? AJ.